Hi, I'm Laura, a 28-year-old financial analyst, juggling numbers by day and managing my life by night. I had recently tied the knot with Jake, the love of my life who, unfortunately, spends more time in airports than at home due to his job. Our rented apartment was our little haven, conveniently located next to my workplace, until one day, it became the stage for an unsolicited critique by none other than my mother-in-law, Marge. Jake was away, as usual, when Marge decided to drop by unannounced. The sight that greeted her was my dinner, a takeout box from the local diner, and my less-than-spotless living room. Well, Laura, what do we have here? A takeout queen in her natural habitat? Marge's voice dripped with disdain as she surveyed the apartment. I bit my tongue, trying to keep the peace. Hi, Marge. I wasn't expecting you. Yeah, I had a long day at work, so cooking didn't quite fit into my schedule. Marge clicked her tongue, shaking her head. In my time, no matter how tired we were, we made sure our husbands came home to a clean house and a hot meal. Seems like times have changed, and not for the better. Her words stung, but I wasn't about to let her walk all over me. Times have indeed changed, Marge. Nowadays, we believe in sharing responsibilities. And with Jake away so often, I manage things the best I can. Marge scoffed, her eyes scanning the room like a hawk. Sharing responsibilities? More like shirking them. You do know that a wife's duty is to keep her house in order, don't you? Or is that too old-fashioned for you? I felt my patience wearing thin. Marge, with all due respect, I work hard every day. My job is demanding, and I do my best to balance work and home. Maybe if Jake was around more, things would be different. Her eyes narrowed, and I could tell I hit a nerve. Excuses. Jake works hard to provide for you. The least you could do is make this place look a bit more habitable. The air was thick with tension. Just then, the door opened, and Jake walked in, weary from his travels, but happy to be home. That is until he saw his mother's face. Mom? Laura? What's going on here? Jake asked, sensing the Cold War in his living room. Marge wasted no time. Your wife here seems to think that takeout and clutter are acceptable. I was just trying to give her some friendly advice. Jake looked from Marge to me, the confusion clear in his eyes. He sighed heavily, a man caught between the two most important women in his life. Can we just not do this now? I just got home. The standoff was palpable, the apartment too small for the egos within it. Jake, torn and tired, could only watch as his mother and wife drew the battle lines. The tension in the apartment could be cut with a knife as Marge continued her relentless critique of my homemaking, or according to her, the lack thereof. With Jake back from his trip, I had hoped for some support, but instead, I found myself trapped in a vicious cycle of criticism and defense. Jake, look at this place. It's a mess. And your wife, she can't even cook a proper meal. Is this how you want to live? Marge spat out her words, each one like a slap to my face. I was seething, but I tried to keep my voice level. Marge, I work a full-time job. It's tough to keep everything perfect. I'm doing my best. Jake, weary and torn, ran his hand through his hair. Mom, please. Laura's working hard. It's not easy for her either. Marge wasn't listening. Nonsense. I worked hard too, but I kept a clean home. I cooked. I took care of my family. That's what a wife does. Her words stung, and I couldn't hold back any longer. Working hard? Marge, you've never worked outside of this house. You don't know what it's like to balance a career and a household. Her eyes flashed with anger. How dare you? Taking care of a home, raising children, that's a full-time job. You wouldn't last a day in my shoes. The room was filled with the sound of our raised voices, Jake stuck in the middle, trying to calm the storm. Let's just take a step back, okay? Fighting won't solve anything, Jake said, his voice strained. But Marge was relentless. Solve? The only solution is for Laura to realize her duties as a wife. This modern nonsense won't work. Not under my watch. I felt like I was hitting a brick wall, my efforts to keep the peace futile. Marge, times have changed. Women work now. We contribute, we share responsibilities. It's not the 1950s anymore. She scoffed, dismissing my words. Share responsibilities? More like shirk them. You're his wife, Laura. It's your job to take care of him, take care of this home. The audacity of Marge, my mother-in-law, knew no bounds. Armed with a spare key, a gift from Jake that he now surely regretted, she turned my apartment into her personal domain. She'd clean, rearrange the furniture to her liking, and cook lavish meals for Jake, meals that conspicuously never included a portion for me. I came home one day to find my living room looking like a furniture showroom, everything repositioned, not a single thing where I'd left it. In the kitchen, Marge was humming away, cooking what smelled like a feast, clearly just for Jake. What the hell, Marge? This is my home. You can't just come in here and change everything, I snapped, my patience finally reaching its breaking point. Marge looked at me, her eyes cold. Oh, I'm just making it more comfortable for Jake. He deserves a proper home, not whatever this is, she retorted, her words like daggers. I could feel the anger boiling inside me. Making it comfortable for Jake? What about me, Marge? I live here too, you know. Or does that not matter to you? She shrugged, dismissive and arrogant. If you took better care of this place, I wouldn't have to step in. But you're too busy with your little and easy job to be a proper wife. That was it. I was done playing nice. Easy? You call this easy? You invade my home, criticize my life, and cook for your son as if I don't exist. This stops now, Marge. You're not welcome here anymore. Marge's eyes narrowed, her voice icy. We'll see what Jake has to say about this. I'm sure he'll appreciate knowing how his wife treats his mother. Jake walked in at that moment, the tension in the air almost tangible. What's going on here? He asked, a weary look in his eyes. Before I could say a word, Marge jumped in. Your wife here thinks she can ban me from our home. She says I've never worked a day in my life. Jake looked from me to Marge, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. Can we not do this right now? He pleaded, but it was too late for pleasantries. No, we're doing this now, Jake. Your mom's been overstepping her boundaries for too long. It's about time she realized this is our home, not hers, I said, standing my ground. The standoff continued, a tug-of-war with no clear winner. Jake, caught in the crossfire, seemed lost, unable to choose a side. But one thing was clear, the line had been crossed, and there was no turning back. The battle for respect and boundaries had begun, and I was ready to fight for my place in my own home. The winds of change blew harshly through our lives when Marge's husband, Frank, fell gravely ill. The hospital bills piled up, and Marge, now desperate, saw us, not as family, but as a solution to her financial woes. One dreary evening, Marge cornered us in the living room, her voice laced with urgency. Jake, Laura, you know Frank's condition. We're drowning in bills. It's time you moved in. Help your family out. Jake looked at me, his face a mix of concern and reluctance. Mom, is it really that bad? Laura and I have our own life, our own expenses. Marge's eyes were steely, her resolve unwavering. It's bad, Jake. And family sticks together. It's what we do. Laura will understand, won't you, dear? I felt trapped, the walls of the room closing in on me. Marge, we understand, but moving in? That's a big step. We have our own responsibilities. But Marge wasn't taking no for an answer. Responsibilities? What's more important than family, Laura? Frank's sick, we need help, and you two are talking responsibilities? The pressure was mounting, and Jake, ever the dutiful son, caved. Okay, Mom. We'll move in. But we need to set some ground rules. Marge nodded, a hint of triumph in her eyes. Of course, dear. Anything you need. Packing up our lives into boxes felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life unfold. The apartment, once our private sanctuary, was now just a memory as we stepped into Marge's house, not knowing it was the beginning of a new chapter of trials. Our first evening there, Marge laid down the law. Now, Laura, I expect you to help around here. Cooking, cleaning, you know, the works. It's only fair since you're living under my roof. I was taken aback. Marge, I work full-time. I can't be a housemaid on top of that. Jake understands that. Marge scoffed, her voice dripping with disdain. Work? That's your excuse? Frank's sick, and you're talking about work? No, dear. You're part of this family now, and you'll contribute. The days turned into a blur of work, house chores, and constant criticism. Every effort I made was met with a scowl or a snide remark from Marge. Laura, is this how you clean? And this dinner, it's barely edible. Is this what you call contributing? I tried to defend myself, to hold on to the last shreds of my patience. Marge, I'm doing everything I can. I'm not a machine. I need some understanding, some space. But understanding and space were luxuries Marge wasn't willing to afford me. Space? This is my house, Laura. My rules. You better shape up, or you'll find yourself out on the street. Life in Marge's house turned from challenging to unbearable when Jake left for another business trip. The absence of my husband seemed to embolden Marge, her criticisms becoming more personal and cutting by the day. You know, Laura, you're really not cut out for this. Jake could do so much better. A man like him needs a real woman, not someone who can barely keep a house together. Marge taunted one evening as I tried, in vain, to bring some order to the living room. I felt a surge of anger, but managed to keep my voice steady. Marge, I'm doing everything I can. I work, I clean, I try to make this house a home. What more do you want from me? Her laugh was cold and mocking. What do I want? I want my son to have a wife who knows her place, who takes care of her family. Not someone who thinks a career is more important than her home. The constant belittlement was taking its toll. In a desperate attempt to ease the tension and lighten my load, I decided to invest in the latest home appliances. A state-of-the-art washing machine, a dishwasher, even a robot vacuum cleaner. I hoped these would make my life a little easier and, perhaps, soften Marge's harsh view of me. But even this was twisted into a point of contention. When Marge saw the new appliances, her eyes narrowed, and I knew I was in for another round of criticism. So, this is how you manage, Laura? Throwing money at gadgets to do your work for you? And whose money is it anyway? Squandering Jake's hard-earned cash on these toys, Marge accused, her voice dripping with disdain. I was at my breaking point. Marge, this is my money. I work hard for it, and I have every right to spend it as I see fit. These appliances, they help me manage the house, something you're always criticizing me for not doing properly. But Marge was unyielding. Your money? Please, Laura. We all know you're living off my son. You're just trying to make your life easier while he's out there, working himself to the bone for you. The return of my father-in-law, Frank, from the hospital marked the beginning of a new chapter, one I had hoped would bring some relief. But instead, it added fuel to the already raging fire. His health barred him from returning to work, but it didn't prevent him from joining Marge in her relentless criticism of me. One evening, as I was trying to catch a moment's peace, Frank's voice boomed through the living room. Laura, look at you, lounging around. No wonder this house is always a mess. And don't even get me started on your cooking. I bit back the retort that sprang to my lips. Frank, I'm not lounging. I've just returned from work. And I do cook, whenever I can. Frank snorted, his disdain evident. Work? That's your excuse for everything, isn't it? A real woman knows her priorities. Keeping a home, taking care of her husband, that's what matters. Not some job. The sting of his words was sharp, but what came next cut even deeper. And another thing, a woman's worth is also measured by her ability to bear children. It's been long enough, Laura. Where are the grandchildren? The accusation hung heavy in the air, a cruel reminder of our struggles. Frank, that's a low blow. You know it's not that simple. We're trying. But Frank was relentless. Trying? Maybe you're not trying hard enough. Maybe you're too focused on your career to give my son the family he deserves. Marge, ever the ally in criticism, chimed in. He's right, Laura. You need to get your priorities straight. This family needs more than just a paycheck from you. Jake, caught in the middle of this familial storm, seemed torn. His loyalty to his parents was strong, but the injustice of their words was not lost on him. Mom, Dad, that's enough. Laura is my wife, and she deserves your respect, not this persecution, he said, his voice firm but weary. But Marge and Frank were unmoved. Respect? She hasn't earned it. Not by a long shot, Marge replied, her eyes cold and unforgiving. Life in Marge's house was suffocating, each day a test of my endurance. I thought I had reached my limit, but the day Jake's sister, Lisa, came back was the day my world turned upside down. I was tidying up the living room when Marge walked in with a sense of purpose I hadn't seen before. Laura, we need to talk. Lisa's moving back in, and she'll need your room. It's the best in the house, after all. I stood there, dumbfounded. My room? Marge, Jake and I live there. We've made it our space. Lisa can't just take it. Marge's eyes were steely, her voice cold. This is my house, Laura. I decide who stays where. And Lisa, she needs that room. You and Jake can move into the smaller one. The unfairness of her demand struck a chord deep within me. Move into the smaller room? Marge, we're not boarders to be shuffled around. We're family, or have you forgotten? Marge shook her head, unmoved by my plea. Family helps each other, Laura. And right now, you need to help by giving up your room. It's not a discussion. Lisa walked in then, her eyes scanning the room like she already owned it. What's the problem, Laura? Can't handle a little change? My mom's right, I need that room. The room felt too small, the walls closing in. I looked at Marge, then at Lisa, the reality of the situation sinking in. You want me to just step aside, to give up my space without a word? That's not going to happen. Marge's expression hardened. It's happening, Laura. And if you don't like it, maybe it's time you found a new place to live. The words hit me like a physical blow. Jake was away, unreachable, and here I was, being cast aside like an unwanted guest. I took a deep breath, my decision clear. Fine, Marge. If that's how you want it, I'll leave. But remember, this is your doing. You're pushing me out. I went to our room, my room, and started packing. Each item I placed in the box was a memory, a piece of a life that was being torn away. As I dragged my suitcase out, Marge and Lisa watched, their faces a mixture of victory and disdain. Goodbye, Laura. I hope you find what you're looking for, Marge said, her voice devoid of warmth. I walked out the door, the weight of the suitcase, nothing compared to the weight in my heart. The bitterness of the escape was overwhelming, but it was also a release, a chance to breathe, to find myself again. As I hailed a cab and gave the driver my destination, I realized that this wasn't just an escape. It was a journey to reclaim my life, my dignity, my identity. And as the cab pulled away, leaving Marge's house behind, I knew that the road ahead might be tough, but I was tougher. Finding myself in a new house, the fresh start I desperately needed felt both exhilarating and daunting. The house was modest, but it was mine, a sanctuary from the relentless storm I had endured. As I unpacked, my phone buzzed. It was Jake, finally back from his trip. "Laura, what happened? Mom said you left. Talk to me." Jake's voice was laced with worry and confusion. I took a deep breath, the events of the past few days flooding back. "Jake, I couldn't take it anymore. Your mom, your sister, the constant criticism. It was too much. They wanted me out, so I left." There was a pause, the weight of my words hanging between us. "Left? Laura, I can't believe this. I'm so sorry." "I had no idea it was this bad," Jake replied, his voice heavy with guilt. I could feel the tears welling up, but I fought them back. "It's not your fault, Jake. But I had to leave. For my sanity. I couldn't live like that, constantly being put down, pushed aside." Jake's voice hardened, a rare edge of anger creeping in. "I'll talk to them, Laura. This isn't right. You're my wife, and they had no right to treat you that way." But the conversation took an unexpected turn when Marge called a few days later, her tone accusatory and sharp. "Laura, why did the movers take the appliances? That's Jake's money you're spending." I held the phone away for a moment, gathering my thoughts. "Marge, those appliances were bought with my money, my salary. And since I was kicked out, I took them with me. They're mine." There was a stunned silence on the other end. "Your money? But those are for the house, for the family," Marge protested, her voice rising. I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. "The family that kicked me out? No, Marge. I'm done. I'm starting over, and those appliances, they're a part of my new life. One that doesn't include constant disrespect and ungratefulness." The call ended with a click, the finality of it echoing in the empty room. It had been a few tranquil weeks since Jake and I moved into our new house, a place we could truly call our own. We set up our furniture and installed the appliances I had taken from Marge's house, marking the beginning of our new life together. But the peace was short-lived, shattered by a frantic call from Marge that I never expected to receive. "Laura, Jake, you have to come back. Frank's sick again, in the hospital. And Lisa, she's pregnant and alone. We're drowning here without you," Marge pleaded, her voice cracking with desperation. I exchanged a glance with Jake, feeling the weight of her words. But the scars of the past were still fresh, and my resolve was firm. "Marge, we're sorry to hear that, but we can't come back. We've started a new chapter, and we intend to keep it that way." Marge's desperation turned to frustration. "But what about family? You can't just abandon us in our time of need." I took a deep breath, the decision clear in my mind. "Marge, family doesn't use each other. Family doesn't make you feel unwelcome in your own home. We helped as much as we could, but now it's time for you to find a solution. Maybe it's time for you to get a job." The silence on the other end spoke volumes. Marge was clearly stunned by my response. "A job? At my age? With Frank sick and Lisa expecting? How can you be so heartless?" The accusation stung, but I knew we were making the right choice. "It's not heartlessness, Marge. It's about setting boundaries. It's about respect and understanding, something we never got while we were living with you. You're going to have to manage, just like we did." Jake, who had been quietly supporting me, finally spoke up. "Mom, Laura's right. We've got our own lives to live. We can't be your safety net forever. It's time for you to take responsibility." The conversation ended with a click, the finality of it echoing through our new home. In the following days, more calls came, each more pleading than the last. But our decision was unwavering. We had endured enough, and it was time for us to focus on our future, free from the chains of guilt and manipulation.